Yes.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to Te Akamori and Matariki Tauira. I te tuatahi ka ino i tātou, tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho, te atau ai te mauri tui, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāki. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Matariki Tauira is a program in its second year and is where we choose 9 participants from across the council and allocate a whetū, a star or a planet to each of them. Then they have 2 weeks to do their research and present back to us what they have learned. Today we have Abigail Wharne, who is the Heritage and Research Lead here at Te Akamori. She is presenting her research on Meremere tu-ahiahi. Ko mai te paki.
Kia ora koutou. No Derbyshire o ko tupuna, no Ingarangi aho, I tai mai aho ki Aotearoa, I tō rua manu teko mā iwa. I tipu ake o ki Bexhill-on-Sea, ko English Channel, kia mōna I tō ai taku wārua. E noho ana o ki Rotorua, ko Abi toko ingoa. So basically, you can probably tell from my accent. I just said that my my ancestors are from Derbyshire and I'm from England. And I moved to Aotearoa in 2019. So I'd like to start this presentation by saying I'm at the beginning of my learning journey. As Sue just said, we've only had 2 weeks to complete this research. And I'm very honoured to have been asked. And I'm also conscious that at points I'll be recounting the knowledge of others. So for that reason, I'll be careful to quote where I got my information from. Okay, so the main things I'll focus on are connection. That's one of the major themes I've noticed whilst completing this research. And also towards the end, I'll do a little bit of reflection. So what this research has meant to me. I thought I'd start with this because there are so many names for stars and planets. So I was given Meremere tu-ahiahi, which is actually Venus as an evening star. But Venus as a morning star has a different name, that is Korpu, and Tauira is the night or morning star. And then through my research, mainly Elson Bestbook, which we'll look at in a bit, I found all these other names as well to describe this one planet, Venus. And I'll return to this point later on because I think there's a good reason why there are so many names, so much to do. Okay, so I'd be letting the library down if I didn't share some of our beautiful books. But I would like to point out that this is just a teeny tiny sliver of information that's out there. And being working in a library, for me, the easiest way to find information was to look at books. But I do acknowledge that there is so much more learning and understanding I can do, which is embedded in Tanga and in stories that are shared orally. And I hope this is just the beginning of my journey and I will be able to speak to people and they will tell me more. So the first book that I'm going to read from is by Elston Best. Am I trying? Now, for me, Elston Best reflects the incredibly confronting nature of this country's history. I can't really read from this book without talking about him as a person. So in the 1870s, he joined the Constabulary Field Force in Taranaki, and he, through that work, was involved in the forceful surveying and sale of Maori land. In November 1881, he took part in the raid on Parahaka, involving over 1,500 troops, which resulted in the destruction of that peaceful settlement. He is also famous for establishing the Polynesian Society with Percy Smith, who's, in fact, the periodical that resulted from that society is still used by researchers today, and it is incredible what he did with Percy Smith, the ethnography work he did, and the fact that this knowledge is recorded, but we have to understand that it's complicated. And in the Dictionary of New Zealand Biography, Geoffrey Sisson says, the evolutionary and racial assumptions that informed his theorizing detract seriously from their ethnographical value. So that's quite a big disclaimer to this book. But also I have listened to Maori experts saying that they are incredibly grateful that this knowledge is recorded. And I'll return to that in a second. But I thought I'd read some of what Best found out by speaking to Maori in the 1920s. There's quite a large section on Venus, so bear with me. So he says, we have here an important orb in the Maori estimation, and one whose beauty he appreciated. Hence the well-known saying, me te mea ko kōpū e rewe I te pai, like Venus as she appears above the horizon. Gray gives it as Meremere ko kōpū. Now, what nicer remark could one make to a handsome woman than to say she is as beautiful as Venus flashing above the horizon? Tamaro of Tu-ahiahi tells us that Venus has three names, Kōpū, Tauira, and Meremere. And as an evening star in the summer, it is called Meremere tu-ahiahi, which is what we have here. In the winter, as a morning star, it is Kōpū. In other districts, Venus as a morning star is called Tauira. As an evening star, Meremere and Meremere tu-ahiahi. Tamaro stated that Kōpū is applied to Venus as a morning star, and another East Coast authority agrees with him. But as an evening star, she is termed tu-ahiahi. Another of his statements was to the effect that a third name for Venus is Puaroa, which may be doubted. So we get the sense, like I said at the beginning, there are lots of different words to describe this one planet. Kōpū is said to be the companion of the sun. She gives warning of the coming of dawn and takes care of all sky and earth folk. One says that she is the tohu-ata, sign of mourning, of the Maori people, while the tohu-ata of Europeans is their hei-hi, or domestic fowl, the wise folk, as a native friend terms them. So he does go on quite a bit, so I'll stop there, because we've only got 15 minutes. Okay, so our next book is Matariki. Probably lots of you have seen this, by Rangi Matamua. And I imagine lots of you have heard Rangi speak about his interview, his ancestors who were actually interviewed for Best's book. And in a podcast I listened to over the weekend, he explained how this book, Best's book, is still the most comprehensive record of Maori star lore. But what he says is his ancestors were not acknowledged for their contributions. So what they told Best makes up most of that book, and they weren't acknowledged. And this led his ancestors to authoring their own work of 400 pages, which includes 1,000 Maori star names, which is many more than Western science has for the stars. His Dr. Matamua's grandfather held onto that book, and then just before he passed away, entrusted it to him, saying, "Knowledge that isn't shared isn't knowledge." So I really recommend anyone who hasn't read this to read this book. It's very easy and accessible. And in here, he only mentions Venus slightly. He talks about how it is the brightest object in the sky, and he also talks about how there is a month named after it. And this book, again, doesn't mention Venus very much, but I thought it was fascinating because the author really goes into detail of how every month was named after what was going on. So Venus appearing in the morning is one of the month names, Corfu, and there are different month names, and it's all about what is going on in nature at that time. And the final book I recommend talks about how Venus was used for navigation. This is, again, a very accessible book. Okay, so I said that one of the key words was connection, and through everything I read, I realised that for Maori, everything in the sky is connected to the environment. So I was saying to Elise the other day, I got the sense that it was as much about survival, so you had to be so connected to what was going on around you to survive. You had to know what, if that star was shining brightly, what it meant. If it was appearing there, what it meant. Also a huge connection to ancestors, so lots of the stars named after ancestors and tell you about what will happen with your ancestors, as we all know with the story of Matariki. Also, just this incredible thirst for knowledge, which is why I got someone looking. Just this understanding is vast and huge, and that's why I'm only at the beginning of my learning journey, because it's a bit overwhelming when you just dip your toe and it's like, whoa, there's so much that's very complicated. And then I had this little person as a pin drop, because this knowledge is also incredibly specific to where you are. I guess because, like I was saying, there is that dependence on the environment and deep connection with what you are close to here, where you stand, that it makes sense that there will be all these different words to describe one planet, because it looks different depending where you are, where you're standing in New Zealand. Okay, just my final reflections. One thing that I found difficult was to not want to talk about Cook's mission to record the transit of Venus, because it's not a very positive thing, which is now a lot of discussion around his secret mission that followed, and to discover the unknown land of the south, but we all know what happened after that. And also, in reading about his recordings, it doesn't seem to be that successful, but I need to learn more about that. I also reflected on me coming from the Northern Hemisphere 3 years ago, and how I felt disconnected from the seasonal celebrations at Christmas, New Year, and Easter, being like, why do we have the Easter Bunny and it's cold and autumnal? And they just make no sense. And then when I started reading about Matariki, I was like, oh yeah, it's New Year. It makes complete sense. This is like the time of year when we need to celebrate the New Year, because it actually is. If you look at the environment around you, the days will start getting longer from this point onwards. And mixed among this was a lot of sadness in realising the impact of changing measurements of time would have had. So this place being colonised, and a shift from a lunar calendar with month names that have meaning to Maori here, that was specific to what was happening to them, to a meaningless Gregorian calendar, is such a cruel way to control and disconnect a group of people who really relied on being connected. Yeah, so it's a bit sad. Well, very sad. And that also made me think about the colonising nature of science. And my brother is a physicist, and I have had many debates with him about this. And I feel personally that modern science has a lot to learn from the Maori worldview, because as I was at Kupu Festival a couple of weekends ago, and Dr. Nahuin Murphy pointed out that science isn't working as it is. I genuinely believe that by becoming more connected to what's going on close to us, we will have a more positive future. And I'd like to end with something, a beautiful connection that when Kingi gave me this star, he wouldn't have known that this connection for me existed, so I feel like there is some magic around Matariki. So, I'm going to embarrass you now, Ollie. I first met my husband, Ollie, at the Evening Star pub.
Wow.
And he asked me to marry him.
Not on that first date.
Not that first date. But what a beautiful way to end, to see that is circular, and I think it is all about connection. And also, that's why I love Matariki this year, it's bringing together two people, two cultures, and that's what New Zealand is, and it is all about being together and thinking about a positive future through connection. Yeah. That's me. Thanks.
Any questions?
Oh, yeah, any questions?
Because they always do questions.
Yes.
Hello.
Question? I'd like to borrow the Rangi book, but having inquired around the library, there are 3 copies in-house, none of which are on loan. Can we get, why don't you make one of them loanable?
We make, so are they all out on loan at the moment?
How many copies do you have?
I wouldn't know. So
Please
Jimmy's
go.
going to check.
She's just going to check.
This is my own copy.
Thank you.
Yep, we'll just check and let you know.
Yeah. We looked at it together the other day, didn't we? But that was the reference only copy up on the second floor.
And on your, yes, and on what, 4.1 it's a reference only.
No, so the first floor you can borrow. So there's 4.
Forwarding I can all checked out currently.
Maybe we need to buy
request.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because I got 2 extra copies of Matariki.
We got a new one, didn't we?
Yeah, got 1 and 2.
So yeah, we've got 4 in there, but they're all out.
Yeah, it's been very popular.
We did get an extra copy just last week, or the week before. Yeah.
One more question, since everybody's so quiet. Where is the club called the Evening Star?
Sorry?
Where's the
Where
pub?
is that
Oh.
Evening Star?
That's in Brighton,
In Brighton in England.
in England.
Thank you.
It's so cool.
It's just by the train station if you find yourself there. Just by the train station.
It's very
Come out of the
convenient.
train station, you go straight ahead across the road, and there it is.
How did he propose?
Sorry.
But you guys, that's enough questions.
He proposed with a beer mat, is that?
Oh,
It
so
took
German.
ages for me to notice.
So German.
Right, so close it up.
Well, thank you, Abby. That was awesome. It was really interesting. Yeah, so that's us for today. You're welcome to have a cup of tea.
Thank you so much.
And thanks everyone for